Hello, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar titled How to Choose the Right Cloud for Continuity. My name is Kevin Collins from Unitrends, and I'm here with Mark Jordan, VP of Technology, and he'll be taking us through the presentation. And don't forget, one lucky attendee will be walking away with a $100 Amazon gift card. We'll contact the winner via email after the webinar. But before we get started, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. This session will be recorded, and after the event, you'll receive an email with a link to the on-demand version of the webinar. I would also encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. You can do so by typing them into the Q&A box in the bottom right of the player. We'll answer your questions at the end of the session. At this point, I'll turn it over to Mark. Enjoy the presentation, and Mark, take it away.
Thanks, Kevin. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. We're going to go through a short presentation on how do you choose a cloud for enterprise-level continuity. So it's a long title, but hopefully we'll make it a much easier to follow presentation. All right, so let's get going here. One of the things that you're seeing with people moving and looking at cloud continuity solutions, one of the reasons they're doing that is because change is accelerating so fast. And you can see here on this little chart, right, the number of IT professionals is that first line, and it's staying relatively flat from 2009 to 2020, a little bit of growth, but not much. But if you look at the servers and VMs and the data that these IT professionals are managing and responsible for, that line is really off the page. So when you look at our IT professionals, they're required to do more and more with the same amount of people. And that's one of the reasons they're looking at cloud solutions, is because it allows them to maybe offload some of the infrastructure costs and even some of the management responsibility to others, outsource it to other organizations. One of the other things that's happening with change is it brings risk, right? And this is just one slide around ransomware. And this is, actually the slide is from 2015, it's even worse now. 60% of enterprises worldwide were attacked by ransomware. I think it's even more than that. Being attacked and actually being brought down is two different things, but the number that the malware is going after every day is increasing, and you look at over there, 259% increase in attacks, and 63% of businesses down for greater than 1 day. So there's a lot of risk. So the continuity piece that we're talking about today is critically important, and organizations are thinking about it often. Unfortunately, one of the problems with the continuity piece is that even though that organizations have it at top of mind, really only about 20% of organizations are testing a DR continuity plan. So it's on top of mind, but it's not really being tested and pursued where the organization knows for sure that they can get back up and running if they're brought down for some reason. What we're finding, though, is that cloud adopters are ahead of the game, and there's some important triggers for cloud continuity. These are the things that cause organizations to move to a cloud solution, right? They have no second site or off-site plan whatsoever, so that obviously can get them moved to some sort of a cloud. Significant pain with managing a secondary site. They don't really want to set up that second site, that private DR location, because of the management piece. There's pain with managing storage at the site. And then a lot of them are using traditional strategies still, tape or rotating disk, and they want to get out of that. So that's one of the reasons that they're moving toward a cloud continuity solution. But one of the things that you've seen, and this is actually in the invite to this webinar, that 30% of cloud spending is wasted. So the wrong choices can be costly, and that's something we're going to talk about today, is how to kind of choose which route you take when you're looking at a cloud continuity solution. So what cloud do you use, right? We've got the public and hyperscale clouds, let's say Amazon or AWS, and our Amazon AWS or Microsoft Azure. Those are the two primary ones that we'll focus on today. You have managed service providers out there that are IT groups that are actually providing services to their customers, and we'll talk about those. And then a vendor cloud, something like the Unitrends cloud. We'll talk about when customers organizations might be best served to use vendor cloud. And you really, what's going to help you choose that is the workloads that matter, right? You have to align your continuity with criticality. So what are you really trying to recover? Are you trying to recover a number of virtual machines so that you can, bring them up and have your Exchange server running or a SQL database running or something like that? Do you have applications that are a little bit more complex than that that you're trying to bring up? Maybe you're using Office 365 and you need to have a ways to recover Office 365 data. But all that, when you look at this little chart that's on the screen right now, it's really the workloads and the recovery objectives that you have that are going to help you choose which cloud solution to use for continuity. The challenge you have is that most solutions are not business focused, and what that means is you'll hear a lot where they talk about backup, right? Hey, we're backing up the data. We're sticking it somewhere so that if you lose one copy, you have a second copy. But they're not really focused on recovery SLAs. They might not be focused on compliance in terms of recovery compliance or how many recovery points that you have or how much retention you should have. And really, down at the bottom, I think this is the most important thing. We've always thought of backup as an insurance policy. Hey, you know what? If I lose some data, this is my insurance policy to bring it back quickly or bring it back, period. Maybe not even quickly, but bring it back. And it's not really a value driver where really what backup can do, and if you do it right with make the right choices around a continuity plan, is it going to help you reduce your infrastructure costs and increase productivity? And even if you have the ability to actually use copy data management with your backups, you can do some proactive analytics. You can look at the data and use it in different ways. So there's a lot of things that backup can do for you that traditionally has not been a focus of most vendors and most resellers. Today we're going to look at 5 continuity use cases with public cloud. Well, I take that back. This is 5 continuity use cases with public cloud: cloud migration, disaster recovery, off-site backup copies, backup cloud VMs, and direct backup storage. But what we're focusing on today is the cloud migration, the disaster recovery piece, the continuity pieces. Okay. So let's think about migration versus disaster recovery. Migration is the ability to, get data up to the cloud. You have it up there. You're using it for compliance. You're replicating it up. You're keeping months worth of data, maybe years worth of data up there, and basically you're getting it off-site to a cloud. Maybe you can test recovery when you do the migration. That's not always something that's available to you. And maybe you can deploy that data somewhere once it's up there. And, it's kind of a plan thing where you have to figure out, hey, where am I going to take it? Once it's in the cloud, am I going to bring it back to another data center to recover it? How do I do that? So migration is really kind of the ability to get that data offsite and have it sitting somewhere so that you can use it again if you have to. DR is a little bit different, right? That's where you replicate it up there, and you actually have recovery SLAs. You need to bring those systems up and run them so that you can run applications up in the cloud. There's going to be testing that you're going to want to be able to do, and then you have to have that bottom one, the failback, the ability, if you're running systems up in the cloud and you bring your on-premises data center back up and running, how do you fail back to make sure that the data that's been created or the information that's been created up in the cloud while it's running is brought back? So you have to have that failback piece as well. So 2 different things, migration and DR, and we're going to talk about this. So the benefits to you. Using a cloud continuity solution, it's simple and affordable if done right. It can be self-managed, and it's highly dynamic, right? So, and then benefits you with, this is with caution, using the cloud, a cloud, and we're talking kind of a hyperscale cloud solution right now, it gives you the offsite compliance. But remember, as you have that offsite compliance in a hyperscale cloud, the longer or the more data that you have up there, the more that they're going to be charging you, because they're charging you for every gigabyte of space that you use. They're not charging you for the protected data that might be sent up there. They're charging you for every piece of data that's sitting in their cloud. So it can start out very, very inexpensive, but if you're looking at compliance that may be months or years, the price can actually can go up quite rapidly. And that's where we're talking about infinite retention. If you're going to get that infinite retention, you are going to be paying for that. So you pay for what you use. So what about a managed service provider? Now, the managed service provider is a little different than a hyperscale cloud, right? The hyperscale cloud, you're kind of responsible for you may be using a service provider to actually help you with Amazon AWS or Microsoft Azure, but if not, you're kind of responsible for doing it. You're really purchasing the infrastructure, and you're purchasing the storage, and maybe you're purchasing some compute. And we'll talk about compute in a little bit later. But with a managed service provider, that's typically much more of a white glove service, and managed service providers have the ability to focus on specific applications. So if you have a critical application that you need to have very aggressive recovery objectives, maybe you have to get this application up within a half hour or an hour. Maybe you have to have very little lost data. So your recovery point objective is very aggressive. That's where a managed service provider can help you quite a bit. Usually they're going to test and prove recovery SLAs for you, and you will pay more, right? There's no doubt about it. I mean, they're giving you that white glove service, and they're guaranteeing recovery SLAs that you're probably not going to get guarantees on recovery SLAs in a hyperscale cloud like Amazon or Microsoft Azure. But as managed service provider, often, that's one of the things you're going to want to ask them for is to prove those SLAs and be able to not only guarantee it, but prove that they can be reached. So you're going to pay more for that. So the benefits to you with the managed service provider is they will agree to aggressive recovery SLAs, and oftentimes they'll be able to prove that they can hit them. They're experts at specific application continuity. Oftentimes you'll see that, particularly if it's an application that concentrates on like an industry vertical, where it's a industry-specific application, like a banking application or maybe a healthcare application. Oftentimes you'll have managed service providers that will focus on one or two of those type of applications, and because of that, they're very good at it. Okay. And now the third one, should I use a vendor cloud? And a vendor cloud would be like the Unitrends Forever Cloud and our DRAS. And what vendors do is usually what we're focusing on is compliance and DRAS solutions, right? We usually are focused on a specific operating system platform. If you look at different vendors, you may find some vendors that are great with VMware, for example. Other vendors might be more focused on, maybe VMware and Windows physical servers, and you get some that'll pull in Hyper-V VMs. But as you have a more heterogeneous environment, if you have Unix or even Linux for that matter, or Unix or other things that are maybe actually servers and not sitting on a VM, that's where the vendor cloud may be a challenge for you. So they focus on specific OS platforms. Often, almost always, it's a fully managed cloud infrastructure. So as an end user, you don't have to do anything from an infrastructure standpoint, and often you don't even have access to the hypervisor at the hypervisor level. So you have access to virtual machines and such, but you don't have access to the hypervisor level. So those are things that you get from the vendor cloud. One thing you always want to ask a vendor, if you're thinking about going with a vendor cloud, and I'm thinking about some of the backup and continuity software companies that are out there and their partners that are reselling their solutions, one thing that you always want to ask them is, can they test and can they prove recovery SLAs? this is something that is surprisingly pretty rare in the industry. You don't see many that will actually test and prove it easily. It may give you the ability to test on your own, where you have to manually go in and run some sort of recovery, recovery test, but to actually orchestrate and schedule a test and report on whether the SLAs for recovery can be met, that's a rare thing in the industry. But so I always ask about that because promises are one thing, but they actually being able to prove that you can do it, that's where that's where you as a customer you want to make sure that you're getting that proof. Often a vendor cloud is moderately priced, right? It's priced kind of in between the hyperscale cloud and the MSP, right? But it's priced in between there up front. Over time, it may not be. Over time, it may prove to be the least expensive, depending on what type of, what you're protecting and what you're trying to do. That's often a moderately priced solution. So the benefits to you, often a vendor cloud, they're going to be experts at recovery from their software, right? So when you're using a vendor cloud, you're also using that same vendor's software on premises. That's what you're using for your backup, and your on-prem backup is really 99% of where you're going to recover from. But that vendor cloud, they're going to be experts at recovery from their software. You usually are going to pay for what you protect. Remember, we talked a little bit about with the hyperscale clouds, you're paying for the data that's actually up in the cloud, the amount of data you have. So the longer you retain data, the more you're going to pay. With a vendor cloud, oftentimes you pay for what you protect, and that's what things that you want to ask about. So if you get into Unitrends, for example, we have something called Forever Cloud, and you pay for what you protect, and then you have a certain number of months or years, whatever you choose, that you'll have recovery points for that data as long as you have it up in our Forever Cloud. But you're paying for the amount of data that you're protecting. And then finally, probably the biggest advantage of using a vendor cloud is it's one vendor for backup and cloud continuity. You have one vendor providing all the services. They're providing the on-prem backup, and they're providing the cloud target. They're providing that cloud infrastructure, and they're the one vendor that's guaranteeing recovery SLAs if you're using their DRESS solution. Okay. So 5 critical success factors. Let's look at these, right? First, you have to understand your needs. Remember, the 2 things you want to ask before you do anything else is, one, what are your recovery objectives? How much data can I afford to lose? That's your recovery point. And how quickly do I need to be back up and running? That's your recovery time objective. So that you have to know that. And the second thing is what are my critical applications? What's the priority that I have in terms of what am I trying to spin up quickly if I need to spin something up? So you have to understand your needs before you can choose the cloud solution to go with. Select the right cloud storage strategy. And this is something that it seems pretty basic, but we see it all the time. Particularly when you're looking at the hyperscale clouds, right? You think about someone like Azure, for example, where they have their VM storage and then they have their blob storage. If you're sending data up and it's just there for compliance, we're just going to keep it there for months and months or maybe years, and you very rarely are going to have to touch it. Recovery time objective isn't all that critical for that data. You want to make sure you select the lowest cost cloud storage that they offer. Don't put it on their VM storage. Put it in their blob storage so that you have a lower cost target. And in terms of cloud storage as well, make sure you look at a vendor solution. If you're looking for compliance and the hyperscale clouds, they look fairly inexpensive, up front. But if you're thinking about compliance and long term, and you're thinking years, you may find that the TCO on a vendor cloud is actually better if you stretch it out over, say, 24 or 36 months than a hyperscale cloud, simply because the hyperscale cloud is going to be charging you for all the space you're using up there as opposed to the amount of data that you initially protected. So those are things that you need to think about when you look at cloud storage strategy. Avoid unnecessary compute costs, and we're going to talk a little bit more about compute here in a minute. But you know, when we say avoid unnecessary compute costs, you know, what we're talking about there is if you're sending data up to AWS or Azure or maybe a managed service provider or even a vendor cloud, and you just have it sitting up there for compliance, you don't want to have to run VMs to actually make that, to be able to do the replication. And oftentimes you'll see that as part of a solution, particularly with hyperscale clouds, where you have to have a running virtual machine up in their cloud to be able to do the replication piece. And that running virtual machine actually generates compute costs. So you're not actually using the platform for DRAS. You haven't you know, spun up in their platform, but you have to have these running machines up there to actually do the daily replication, and that's going to generate compute costs. Plan for a way back. This is an interesting one because oftentimes you think about there's a lot of products out there that'll help you get data or migrate data up to a hyperscale cloud, but they don't have a way to actually bring the data back if you need to. So what happens? Is it going to cost you more money to bring it back? Are you going to have to use a different product? Is it going to take you time that you don't have? You know, those are things that you need to think about. Once again, putting data up in any cloud for compliance purposes is great, but you have to be able to bring it back when you need to, and you should know that up front. What is it going to cost? What is it going to take to bring that data back? And finally, keep on-premises in mind, right? You know, we said it earlier in this presentation that if you're running a data center and you have your own data center and you're looking at the cloud simply as a compliance and continuity type of solution, your first thought still has to be on that on-premises data center. 99% of all recovery is going to be on-premises. You know, so keep that in mind. You know, there's solutions out there that will allow you to back up directly to a cloud target, that they don't have anything on premises. What's the recovery time going to be? You know, if 99% of your recovery is local, can you afford to spend the time that it would take to bring systems back from a cloud target from a recovery standpoint? Might not be so bad on individual files, but if you start talking full servers, that's going to take a lot of time. So keep on premises in mind. So let's look at those again. You know, I'm going to go through these quick. Understand your needs, know what your use cases are, what your recovery SLAs are, and one thing I didn't mention, know what your budget is, because that's going to play a big factor in understanding your needs. Select the right cloud strategy. Once again, we talked about this. You know, the lowest cloud cost is going to be like the Azure Blob, the object storage. It's the most dynamic, slowest performing. You know, so if recovery SLAs are critical, you know, that low-cost object storage isn't probably not going to be the target you want to use. And then the block-based, the VM hard disk, that's going to be higher cost, but it gives you better performance. Here's the unnecessary cost, and we got a little chart coming up here in a minute that shows that unnecessary compute can be up to 70% of the cost of the total solution, and we're going to show you a way for that not to be the case here in a few minutes. And then plan for the way back, and keep on-premises in mind. You know, once again, 99% of your recovery is going to be from an on-premises backup solution. So how can Unitrends help? And you know, and this is one thing that, you know, we wanted to do this webinar in a way that you could hear about the different options that you have, but we also want to talk a little bit about how Unitrends can help you. And one thing that we have, and this is a product, and it's the first one I'm going to talk about today, is Boomerang for cloud disaster recovery. And this is for VMware VMs. It allows you to basically migrate, replicate your VMware VMs to Amazon AWS or Microsoft Azure. You can organize them into groups. You manage the DR process. It replicates it to the lower cost Azure our AWS storage. If you have a disaster, you have the ability to, on command, run those VMs as an Azure or AWS VM. It'll actually, if you're up in AWS, for example, it will remodel the VM to run an EC2 so you can run it up there. It spins it up, and you resume operations. So it can be a true DR solution for you with VMware VMs. And then you have once the issue is resolved, you have a one-click failback to your on-premises environment. So it's a really easy product to use, and it can be used with VMware VMs and Amazon AWS and Microsoft Azure. And it's purpose-built for that public cloud, right? We just talked about it. Replicates the low-cost cloud storage. It remodels the VMs so that they can run natively up there. It uses no cloud compute for replication. I think that's the critical thing. We talked about that earlier, that you want to make sure you don't use unnecessary compute. The Boomerang product uses no cloud compute for replication, then it automates all the steps to deploy and failover, and it automates all the steps to bring it back. And this is a chart I mentioned a minute ago that talked about kind of that impact of compute. And if you look here, and this is just the number of VMs using Boomerang on those VMs, and you can look at the cost there, the annual cost. If you wanted to do a DR plan for 100 VMware VMs, annual cost is about $24,000. But the EC compute, it stays consistent all the way through. There's no unnecessary compute. So as the environment grows, that's not growing. The cloud storage grows some at the different levels, the number of VMs that you have, and the total DR budget grows. But you can see the more VMs you have, the compute percentage of the total DR budget actually diminishes. And that's something you want to look at when you look at any solution, not just the Unitrends Boomerang solution, but any solution you look at. Find out what that compute percentage of the total DR budget is going to be, and if it's going up as you add more VMs into your DR plan, that's not a good thing. So that's what we already emphasized. Boomerang requires no compute for replication. And here's some key competitive differentiators, and you look at the different products that are out there. These are things that you want to think about when, things we promote with our Boomerang product with VMware. It's 1/10 the cost of equivalent DR solutions, has that pilot-like capability, and I think the ease of operations is probably the most important thing. One click to deploy, one click to restore. Incredibly easy. Remember, it's for VMware VMs only. And that's just a thing on how much it costs. Fully deployed, $33 a month, under $33 a month per VM. Okay. When is Boomerang not ideal? If one of the things you'll find when you're migrating VMs into Amazon AWS or Microsoft Azure, there's going to be some limitations on VMDKs. If you have VMDKs with greater than 1 terabyte greater than 1 terabyte of capacity, Boomerang's not going to be a good solution. If you have to use operating systems that are not supported in Azure or AWS, Boomerang's not a good solution, and you can read through the rest, right? If you got iSCSI pass-through disk, physical RDM disk, independent persistent disk, Boomerang's not a good solution. And if you require consistent, predictable recovery SLAs, Boomerang might not be the good solution for that either, because Boomerang is a really inexpensive solution to get data up and do the migration and have the one-step failover and fail back. But it's hard to predict the SLAs. It's hard to predict how long it will take to actually remodel a VM. It's all going to be dependent on size. So with that being the case, the Unitrends cloud, this is a vendor cloud, and we've talked before about the managed service provider. They might be a good solution here, but the Unitrends cloud may help as well. It solves Boomerang, Azure, AWS limitations because it's backup-based. We can seed large data sets to our cloud. And then we have DRAS for VMware, Hyper-V, and physical Windows. And our DRAS is based on you have two options, right? You have kind of an unlimited DRAS option where You don't have a 1-hour SLA, so it's a little less expensive. The entry point doesn't cost as much. Or we have a white glove 1-hour SLA, but I think which some you may need on some of your systems. But I think really the secret sauce that from a Unitrends perspective, and this is something that I would recommend talking to all of your vendors about. It's not just, if you're using Unitrends, that's great. We'd love to have you as a customer. But if you're not working with Unitrends, you have a different vendor that's providing backup and continuity for you, ask them about recovery assurance. Do they do automated DR testing and compliance reporting? Can you orchestrate a test and know that you can meet your recovery SLAs? If the answer to that is no from your vendor, then I would recommend consider how you can get that particular service. Because once again, I said it earlier in the presentation, it doesn't do you much good to have a guaranteed recovery time. It doesn't do you much good to tell have organizational rules on what your recovery time should be. It doesn't do much good to set SLAs, recovery SLAs, if you don't test and report on it. One last thing I wanted to mention, and I think we had this in an earlier slide as well. Many of you are actually starting to use Office 365. So you're moving some of your applications up into the cloud, and one of them, Office 365, is probably the most widely used application. This and things like Salesforce and maybe Google Docs, but the Office 365, a lot of customers are going up there. One thing to know that if you delete an email, it does not stay in your, it's not available for recovery. Well, it says here 14 to 30 days. I think you actually can tweak it up to 45 days. But even at 45 days, if someone accidentally deletes some information out of SharePoint or out of our email, out of Office 365, it could be gone forever after 45 days if they don't have some sort of way to back that up, right? And so if you go down, and you can see the other things there, most lost data is due to user error. And users can choose to permanently delete files and email without any recovery options. So Unitrends does provide a cloud backup for Office 365. And it's a service, it's not a product. It doesn't require any installation, and it's all self-service, so your end user can do it, and it takes up to 6 snapshots per day. And it uses Microsoft Azure, a different geography, as a target for the Office 365 data. So the data that you move to the cloud, it's being protected in the cloud, and it's got a very easy self-service recovery and search. It's something that we're finding there's been a lot of adoption for Office 365, and there's been a huge need for some sort of Office 365 backup. And the one thing I would say about Office 365 backup, because there's other vendors who are doing it, where they actually take the data and they bring it back down to an on-premises target. The way Unitrends looks at it, you move to the cloud because you wanted to be in the cloud, you might as well use a different geography in the cloud for the backup. It seems to make more sense to do it that way, and then you can recover no matter where you're sitting. So what should you do next? Remember our 5 use cases. We only concentrated on cloud migration and disaster recovery, right? But remember, there's other use cases, off-site backup copies, backup, Azure or AWS VMs, and direct backup storage. So remember those 5 use cases, and remember those 5 critical success factors, right? Understand your needs. Select the right cloud storage strategy, avoid unnecessary compute costs, plan for a way back, and keep on-premises in mind. Okay, and I'm going to go back, and I would say this. We looked at three options, right? You've got the hyperscale public clouds like Amazon and Microsoft, AWS and Azure. Great solutions, great options. Remember, they look pretty inexpensive up front, but make sure that you kind of track that out over 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, and see where the expense is going to go. Avoid those compute costs. If you got applications that are the most critical thing for you, and that's your use case, that you need to bring certain applications up very fast, that's where the managed service providers fit very well. And then finally, for a kind of an overall solution in terms of being able to not only get your local protection and your cloud compliance and continuity, and along with recovery assurance, that's where a vendor cloud like the Unitrends Forever Cloud with our DRAS solution, that's where we fit very well. So those are the things that, when you think about your 5 critical success factors, look at those 3 options and determine where you're a better fit. So last one, visit our website, unitrends.com. And up there, you can find information on our backup, our Office 365 product, our Boomerang product. You can watch a live demo. We'd love for you to watch a live demo. And you can go in and chat immediately with one of our continuity experts. So we have a chat window on our website, and we'd love to hear from you and talk to you about it. Keep your eyes out. We've got some things happening over the next few weeks that I think you'll find very interesting. If you attended this webinar, keep your eyes peeled. We'll be putting up a cloud cost calculator on our website very shortly, where you'll actually be able to go in and plug in your own information and determine what, from a cost perspective, is a good choice for you when you start thinking into account things like what kind of compliance you need, how long you're going to keep data up there, what kind of recovery objectives do you have, what are you trying to recover, and those sort of things. So be on the lookout for that. I would say probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks we'll have our cloud calculator up and ready to go. So, all right. I'm going to leave this one up, Kevin, so that people can see the links. And I'm assuming that we probably have a few questions.
Yes, we can dive in with the questions. As a reminder, you can still ask a question. You can do so by typing it into the bottom right-hand side of the player, and we'll get to your questions shortly. So the first question is, how easy is it to test recovery in each option?
Well, I think that's depending on the products you're using, right? You look at, usually an MSP and a vendor solution like the Unitrends cloud, that's where you're going to have an easier time to test recovery on an automatic basis, kind of an orchestrated and scheduled basis. You certainly can, test recovery up in one of the hyperscale clouds. It may not be quite as automatic if you're not using a product like, for example, Boomerang. Boomerang, you could do it. But one thing to remember, typically when, I can speak to the Unitrends cloud, right? When you look at Unitrends cloud, we based our fees on the amount of data you're protecting and the amount of VMs, the number of VMs you have in the DRAS queue if you're using us for DRAS. So there's no extra charge to actually run a disaster recovery test if you want to. I mean, that's built into the fees. Where if you look at something like a hyperscale cloud like AWS or Azure, they're going to charge you for the compute if you spin things up and run the test. So kind of know what that's going to cost before you run it.
Okay, next question is, this one might be a little difficult. Cost is always the driving factor. Do you have general pricing comparisons for the different types of cloud-based DR and storage solutions?
And that's where our little calculator will do it. So it's hard for me to actually give those out on a call like this because there's so many factors that play into it. What kind of storage are you going to be using? What kind of where are you what application is? What are you going to spin up? How many numbers? What kind of retention do you want? All that is it's really difficult to say what the costs are going to be. I can tell you that when you look at the 3 options, typically up front, when you first deploy, the hyperscale clouds are going to give you they're going to give you a fairly low price per gigabyte, right? That's what you're basically paying, and then compute on top of it. So it's going to look pretty attractive, but you just have to kind of factor in how is it going to look in a year? How's it going to look in 2 years? And it might look great, right? I mean, you know what your infrastructure costs are now, and if you're moving some things up to a cloud so that that you don't have to invest in other infrastructure for your continuity piece at another site, it might be an easy business case for you to make. But usually that's going to be a little bit less upfront, Your vendor cloud like Unitrends probably somewhere in the middle, and then the managed service provider is going to be at the higher end, but that's because typically they're providing a full white glove service and doing specific applications. But one thing I would say, I don't have I know that's not answering the question completely. What I would say is keep an eye on the Unitrends website, and we'll have that cost calculator, comparison calculator up and running here fairly soon, and that'll do better for you.
Okay, next question is, I'm trying to move applications to AWS. Can Boomerang help me with this?
Yeah, we talked today about really about replication, backup, and continuity. I mean, that's what we were talking about. But Boomerang can also be used as a migration tool. So if you want to just, if you've got some VMware VMs and you want to move that up to, like you said, AWS, and you want to remodel them to run in EC2, Boomerang can certainly do that for you. And if you're doing it for, say cloud bursting where you eventually might want to bring them back, Boomerang's there to help you bring them back, because it'll keep the VMware configuration information, VMware VM configuration information, so it can redeploy it as a VMware VM or unremodel it to a VMware VM, I guess you can say. But yeah, it can be used as a migration tool. And we actually have a separate price if you want to use it as a migration tool. It's like a one-time fee as opposed to a subscription fee that you would use if you're using it as a backup and DR tool.
Okay, and here's a follow-up to Boomerang. A lot of businesses seem not to fully trust leaving their data in the cloud because they don't really know how secure the whole cloud infrastructure is, the hardware is, the software is, and even how well protected the data centers are. How does Boomerang secure the data during the transmission?
Well, I mean, it is going to move it as as encrypted blocks up to the cloud, right? So, I mean, it is encrypted going through through the tunnel or the connection you have up to AWS or Azure. One thing that I would say, around the cloud is that, obviously, these platforms, they have spent probably billions of dollars building secure environments. So if you go out to their website, and Unitrends has done the same thing, many MSPs have done the same thing, where they've spent a lot of money, put a lot of resources into making sure their platforms are secure. If you go out to AWS or Azure's websites, you'll find there'll be a page that shows all the security certifications they have, designations, whatever you want to call that. So I understand that there is a concern about security. They hear about the cloud, and they hear about people being things being attacked and broken into or hacked into and captured, and that does happen from time to time. But the one thing I would say about these platforms is, they are very secure and they spend a lot of money on it, but having multiple copies, having an on-premises copy as well as a cloud copy, or even you could actually, with the Unitrends product, if you have VMs running in Amazon AWS, you can back them up there and replicate them to Microsoft Azure if you needed to. So there's a lot of options, but having them in multiple sites and making sure that when it's traveling from one site to the other, that it's in a encrypted state, those are the things that you're going to want to do. I would add on to this. We talked very briefly as we were going through the presentation about direct-to-cloud backup. One thing to remember when you do a direct-to-cloud backup, that if you're directly backing up to the cloud a particular a system that, well, let me rephrase this. A lot of times you see that direct cloud backup, what they're doing is they're doing some sort of a replication of file folders that are on a server or on a system, and you see this all the time. And what happens is there could be files that are actually got a malware in them, and those are being replicated up to that directory that you're sending the data to. When you're doing a backup type of replication, it's a little bit different because you're actually backing up a server into blocks of data that are encrypted, and those are being sent up. So, and then you have different recovery points. So you can usually spin back to a recovery point before any sort of a malware attack. And I would point out that the on-premises appliance that Unitrends provides, we actually have a ransomware detection built into it, so that we'll watch for anomalies in block change rates while during a backup, and if the anomaly is there, which could indicate that a malware is present, we'll alert our end users on that. So from a security standpoint, to get back to the original question though, these guys have spent millions, if not billions of dollars making their platforms as secure as possible. Doesn't make it 100% foolproof, but very likely they could be more secure than the on-premises data center that for the end user.
Okay, next question. You mentioned OS compatibility. Does Unitrends Cloud support everything and still guarantee retention times?
Yeah. For everything that we can back up, we can send to our cloud, and you can use the Forever Cloud, and you can get the compliance if you need it for 90 days or a year, whatever. We can get it up there. Our DRaaS offering that sits on top of our cloud is for VMware VMs, Hyper-V VMs, and Windows physical servers. So the recovery time on other systems, if you get, for example, some Linux or Unix, something that's not in a VM already, a VMware VM or a Hyper-V VM, if you have like physical servers, recovery time is going to be a little bit longer, because on those you'd actually you wouldn't be able to spin those up in cloud from a DRaaS in the DRaaS solution. But everything we protect, we can replicate up to our Forever Cloud and keep that up there for you.
Okay, just a couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up. When can a vendor cloud save me money?
Well, I think when we talked about the compliance piece and how you might keep months and months or even years worth of data up in a cloud, as you're looking at one of those hyperscale clouds like Amazon or Microsoft, they're charging you for every gigabyte of space that you're using. So as that increases over the year or 2 years or 3 years, that price continues to go up and up all the time. Where a vendor cloud like the Unitrends Forever Cloud, oftentimes they're going to charge you for the amount of data you're protecting. So you may be receiving a charge for, let's just put a number out there, a terabyte of data or 10 terabytes of data. That's what the charge is for. So you could have 1 recovery point or 100 recovery points for that data, and the charge would be the same. So that's where the vendor cloud, you look at it over a 2 or 3 year period of time, the vendor cloud can actually turn out to be much less expensive than a hyperscale cloud on the compliance side, and oftentimes on the DRaaS side as well, simply because of the compute charges. But that's something that our little calculator, when it goes up here in the next week or two, that cloud comparison calculator will help you with.
Excellent. And then the last question is, and you covered this a little bit earlier, but aren't public clouds like AWS and Azure a lot less expensive than using a vendor cloud or MSP?
They can be. It depends on what you want to, what they're use them for. But remember, it's one of those things where it might be less expensive up front, but as the months go on, that fee can continue to rise, and there can come a point not too far out in the future where it passes the cost of a vendor cloud or an MSP. That's why you have to look at those success factors, or the things that you really need to consider. Why are you using it? Are you trying to recover applications quickly? Is it just for long-term compliance? What are you using it for? And then you compare the cost and the benefit from the different sites. And remember, someone like an MSP that focuses on a specific application, yeah, they're going to be more expensive, but that might be the only way that you can guarantee that you can get that application up and running within a very short period of time. So sometimes the cost benefit is not so much how much it costs, but how much it saves you in the event that you have downtime. I mean, I'm sure your CFO and your CEO, they know 100% what it costs if their systems go down, and what's it cost them every hour that systems are down. You factor in that amount, the MSP might be the least expensive route to take in the event of a failure.
Excellent, Mark. Well, thank you so much. We're out of time here, so we'll wrap it up. As a reminder, this webinar was recorded, and you'll receive an email with a link to the on-demand version. We'll also announce the $100 Amazon gift card winner in that email as well. Thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to having you on future webinars. Take care, everybody.